With all the focus on the Democratic 2020 candidates, conservative grassroots organization Heritage Action for America unveiled what that group says is a, quote, winning agenda for Republicans in 2020.
The initiative is based on the results of 3 opinion polls that have been conducted nationwide. Executive Director Tim Chapman says that the goal was to determine what is currently motivating the GOP and create a roadmap for conservatives to build an agenda. He joins us now to expand on the findings. Tim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Although we were just talking about
fightings. There may be some fightings.
Tim, I was really fascinated by this polling because, I mean, it showed that immigration is at the top of voters' minds, but broadly it shows that there is a huge disconnect between what a lot of the focus on is here in Washington and what Republican voters actually want. So tell us a little about.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot's changing in the conservative movement and the party, really. And I think that if you look at 2016, the president was the only guy in that primary who didn't run in some fashion as a Reagan Republican.
Right.
And because he ran on kind of non-traditional issues, he was able to pull a coalition together that looked a lot different than coalitions we've had in the past. And he was able to bring working class Americans into the coalition.
Those working class Americans.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a big challenge for him. I think that the issues that white working class Americans face, all working class Americans face.
Yes.
And I think that's a big challenge for the party, but yes. Yeah. And so I think that what the party has to do is figure out a way to talk to that specific segment of the country and put issues in front of them that attract them going forward. And so that's what we've been working on.
So Heritage historically has focused a lot on tax cuts, on deregulation. I mean, is that still the agenda for the party moving forward?
Look, tax cuts and deregulation are important. They help fuel economic growth. I don't think that can be the only thing you run on.
So that's the most interesting thing, right? Is that the part of the Trump break apart the Overton window was that it's like, oh, wait, GDP growth is not the be-all, end-all of a society. And actually, voters don't respond to that.
Although he's pretty
whatsoever.
happy to tout it when it goes in his favor.
Absolutely. Of course he is. I mean, everybody's happy about GDP growth, but it's like this isn't the only important thing. What are the issues that are really important?
So what popped for us is we did significant survey work. We did a couple national surveys. We did a battleground 15 congressional battleground district survey and a 5 battleground state survey. And what really popped for us is that the issues that are animating people are around immigration, culture, workforce, and economic fairness. Yeah. And you've got to look at those issues, and the challenge for Republicans and conservatives really is to find a way to take your principles and apply those to those issue areas. And to me, you can't do that by just promoting the same policies we've been promoting as a party for 30 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's the most interesting part. And I mean, talk a little bit about the legacy of your organization in this, because, I mean, Heritage Action for America was not necessarily one who's known for pushing an immigration agenda or any of these other things in expense of one on spending. How has that ideological evolution come about under your reign?
Well, I think we've been there since we started Heritage Action, the sister organization to Heritage, in 2010. And a lot was changing at that time. Yeah. And that was a huge year. We had the Tea Party wave that happened. The Tea Party wave started to change Washington, but really what began to happen is a lot of kind of anti-establishment sentiment. Yeah. And that anti-establishment sentiment, it was on the left and the right, really. But people were getting very tired of kind of the same status quo in Washington. And so what people were increasingly looking to us to do was to find a way to be creative and think about, okay, you're an organization whose sister organization, the Heritage Foundation, has been here since 1973. You've been the cradle of the conservative movement for a long time. Think about ways that you can think about conservative principles and apply them to the challenges of today. And so we see ourselves in that role as being able to kind of try to lead the movement in a sense. And I think that Trump, really. We were in these battles. I mean, for 6 years, 2010 to 2016, Heritage Action was in these battles with the leadership of the Republican Party. And I think we did not see Trump coming. I'm not saying that. But Trump really kind of rode the wave that a lot of the stuff that we were doing, a lot of that anti-establishment stuff, and we were talking about cronyism, and we were talking about the ways that Washington was constantly failing all sorts of people across the country. And he was able to come in, and he kind of rode that wave in. Yeah. And I think that's given us a moment to step back and think, well, all right, now we've got to think about what what is the real conservative agenda that aligns with this populist moment that we're in today.
Well, and part of the challenge that I want to hear your thoughts on is you talked about Trump's appeal with the white working class, which is undeniable, especially white working class men in particular, and how that needs to be expanded to a multiracial coalition. How do you do that, though, when the rhetoric is coming out about, send them back and the Nazis that marched in Charlottesville, there's fine people on both sides. Like, how do you overcome that?
It's got to be about policy. At the end of the day, it's got to be about policy. And we're encouraging the administration to put forward right now a policy agenda that focuses on working class issues. And I believe that at the end of the day, you're always going to have this. I can't change the president's rhetoric, right? But we can go out to communities across this country and tell people how various policies will impact them at the end of the day.
But if they're hearing that message coming from the White House, and this is the leader of the party, right? If that's setting the tone, people aren't going to feel welcome in the Republican Party. Yeah,
it's not a helpful tone. Yeah, I mean, look, it's not. I understand that, and it's not all the president. I mean, there's stuff going on all around him. I mean, the tone is being dragged down by all the actors on the stage right now. I mean, like everything could be better. But I actually I'm optimistic that we can get to a place soon as a conservative movement where we start to put these policies front and center. And I just think when you start to drill down on the policies, and if people go to our website and look at what we actually discovered in this polling, you'll see that these policies cut across all segments of the country.
Tell us a bit about the policies. That's what I'd actually.
I mean, so look,
it's not something we hear from the White House.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that immigration obviously is huge, and there are on the immigration issues. The frustrating thing is that in the polling, I think it's skewed in the polling because immigration has come to be identified as the president's signature issue. But I think when you drill down to really common sense things like should people who come to this country illegally be able to access the social benefits that we have in this country? I think when you look across all demographics, that's a no-brainer, okay? And then you look at other issues like, economic fairness or like workforce issues. I think workforce is huge. We've discovered that there is a right now across all the different polls that we looked at, and this is bipartisan, people are generally happy that wages are going up. But so there's some optimism there, but it's tied to this extreme anxiety about what might come down the line. In one of our polls, we had 83% of respondents say that they were worried that their jobs were going to be automated out of existence within 10 to 15 years.
So what do you propose to deal with that? I mean, you've got, on the Democratic side, talking about UBI, talking about raising the minimum wage, talking about federal jobs guarantees, talking about unionization. What's the Republican answer to that?
I think we need to reinvigorate the notion of all sorts of kinds of work as being dignified in this country. So right now, just for example, this touches a little bit on workforce, but it touches on higher education as well, which is a big issue that popped in our polls. Right now, Pete Buttigieg actually got this 50% right, in my opinion, at the beginning of his campaign. He went out on stage and he said, why is it that 50% of this country who doesn't go to college is subsidizing the other 50% of this country who goes to college? That's exactly right. That's not fair. Now, their answers are bailouts and more money thrown at the problem. I think what you need to do is say, no. Not everybody needs a four-year college degree, and increasingly a four-year college degree is not what's going to allow you to achieve the American dream in this country. Sure. Instead, let's say we are going to allow people to access those funds, with the federal funds that we currently let people use for college. You can access those funds for vocational training, for apprenticeship training, things like that.
Can I ask you a specific question on this? Because Sagar and I were talking about this actually yesterday. The fastest growing industry is healthcare. The fastest growing occupation is certified home health aid, right? Which are incredibly low paid. I mean, they weren't even subject to the minimum wage laws until just a few years ago. There was a big profile in the New York Times of a woman who's making, I think, basically $10 an hour doing very difficult work. I mean, how do you make jobs like that, which are the jobs that our economy is spinning off and creating, how do you make those middle class jobs?
I think that's a great question, and I think there's a there's a, as you both know, there's a growing debate right now within the Republican Party about whether or not we should actually be, in some way, shape, or form, prioritizing those kinds of jobs. Now, that's a huge debate because there's our party, one of our principles is free markets, right? And whether you want to actually extend into that or not. But I think it's a challenge that Republicans should definitely be
My
thinking
response
about.
to them would be that the entire legal regime is an intervention in the market,
Right.
and that
Yeah,
markets are not for the man. Man created the market. But
Indeed.
yeah, we digress.
Fascinating.
So thank you, Tim.
Yeah,
Come back
really
and keep
appreciate
talking
it.
to
Hey,
us.
thanks
It's
for having
really
me.
interesting.
Appreciate it.
Next on Rising, what issues are most important to Latino voters in 2020?
One of the most in-depth surveys conducted in battleground states sheds light on their priorities as Rising continues.